You're on.
Okay, everybody hear me okay? All right, my name is Keith Tuck. I'm from Bedford County, about a couple hours south of here, and right on the southern part of the county. I'm about a mile or so from Smith Mountain Lake. I'm sure most of y'all have heard of that. Worked several other jobs. I mean, I always wanted to farm, just full farm, but when I got married, of course, started having kids and things, had to work a few other odd jobs and stuff, but after about 10 or 12 years of being married, after our last child was born, we have 4 children, me and my wife, she's here today. I was looking for another job, and she said, well, you might as well stay at home and just farm and be there for the kids, get them on and off to school and everything, because what I make would go in child care anyway. And I said, okay, so you didn't have to ask me twice. I stayed home. Worked good for me. So that was about 12 years ago, and I've served on several local boards. I'm on the Soil and Water District Board, our local Cattlemen's Association. I'm on the board of the VFGC now, and my kids are involved in either Forage or FFA or some of them both, and I help out with that as much as possible. My grandfather purchased the farm that we're located at in about 1962. He was farming prior to that, but we're below Smith Mountain Lake. It was Leesville Lake. That's where his farm was. It's now underwater. So he had to relocate. So he purchased where we're at. The farm was, a lot of it was in timber, had a little bit of open land, but he timbered it pretty hard, and in my opinion, timbered it too hard, because now I'm lack of shade in a lot of fields, very few trees. But we always had cows and, you know, hay and pasture, but we grew tobacco. That was our main focus. We had about 20 acres of tobacco, and that came before anything. You know, all day long I worked in walking up and down them fields, topping, pulling, chopping weeds, whatever. Like now my wife, she wants a garden, and she's like, I want a garden. Won't you help me get here and pull these weeds? I said, I've done it in a 20-acre garden for my life. I don't want to do it no more. So a little bit of history on it is we have about 260 acres of grass that's rotationally grazed. I keep somewhere around 100 cows. I try to keep my own replacement heifers, usually, you know, 15 to 20, it varies from year to year. Works out to about 2.5 acres, just under 2.5 acres a cow. We used to cut 120 acres in the spring before I started this, and then later in the year, fall cutting, we would cut an additional 60 acres. But then after I started this, we cut it back to just 60 acres once. But now, I've since, as you can see there, in 2016, I sold all my hay equipment. I'm not making any hay. I purchase locally what little bit of hay I need. 2013, I switched to a fall calving, and as I said, in 15 we purchased our hay. And the reason why I did that, I was using less and less hay. I had all that hay equipment. It was 20 plus years old. It was sitting there. I was having to either work on it or replace it. Started pricing new rollers and things. Y'all know how expensive they are. New mowers, $50,000, $25,000. I remember talking to my grandfather when I was younger, and the hay roller he bought brand new when they first kind of came out in the 70s, he said he paid $4,200 for it, and he'd done custom rolling for neighbors and stuff because nobody had one, and it was paid for the first year. And so I started pricing the new equipment. You know, a new roller and a new mower is going to run you $70,000 to $80,000. And I said, I can buy a whole lot of hay for $70,000 or $80,000, probably 20 years worth of what I need. So I decided to take a plunge and start purchasing it. It's just a shot of some conventional grazing, which you see around a lot. Cows stay in the same field all year round. Grass never gets a rest or a break. It just stays, you know, eaten down pretty short most of the time. Like I said, we used to cut the hay. When we done this, we put up anywhere from 350 to 400 rolls a year. Doing all that hay cutting and harvesting and hauling it, probably about a month's worth of labor. We'd feed from, say, Thanksgiving till spring, about 5 to 6 months a year. Feeding was about 2 hours a day, 7 days a week. And here's just a shot. The far field you can see with the cows to the left of it, all that is pasture. So we would cut, half of what we cut in the spring was pasture land, and then we would turn around and graze it. There's just an aerial view of the farm. The red that you see, where's my swing? All this is the farm right here. All the red is what we cut for hay in the spring. So pretty much about 3/4 of it was cut. Now I cut none of it, so it saves a whole lot of time, a whole lot of fuel and money. And if it turned dry, usually it does, June or July, you turn the cows in where you just cut, and it's not, 6, 8 inches tall. It's gone in no time, and then we're turning around taking that same hay we just took off the field a month ago, bringing it right back to them. I said, this ain't making sense. So I remember talking to my grandfather several years back before he passed away, and he was telling me about back in the 1960s when he built his new home, which is now not there because of the lake. It was about $11,400, brand new brick ranch house. So I looked back and done some research, and I found this. In this 1960s prices, cattle, a 500-pound calf would bring you about $115. And it took 110 of them calves to buy a house, 22 to buy a car, of course gas about a quarter a gallon. Today's prices, and that might be a little bit low number, but just say $600 for a 500-pound calf. It'd take you $317 to buy an average size home today. A car take you $56. You want to buy one of these new diesel trucks, it's going to take you over 100 calves. And of course, gas is more than $2 a gallon. But it got me thinking, the days of the cheap fuel and cheap equipment are gone. So, we got to try to do something different. Now, my father, he tried rotational grazing in the late 80s. We didn't have a water system set up. We just had a creek and a pond on the backside of the property, so he built some long lanes, and it worked fairly well. The cattle had to walk a little further, but they were doing it, and they liked being moved and stuff. But back then, the mentality was, you eat that grass till it's nothing left, then you move them. So they would eat it down to nothing, then they would move to the next paddock. Worked okay for about 2 or 3 years, and then all of a sudden, field full of weeds, because it stressed them plants, worked them too hard. So we had to convert back, reseed everything, and he pulled out the cross fences, which were just a single wire fence, but went back to conventional grazing. We got out of the tobacco business around the year 2000 when they had the tobacco buyout program, because you either had to get big or get out. And we chose to get out. And of course, we started focusing more on the cattle, but I wanted to make a little more off of it and do it more efficiently. So I started doing a lot of research and stuff about the rotational grazing again. But we needed a better water system. Now, saying that, one of the biggest hurdles in farming, any type of farming, with the more mature generation is, I had to watch what I say there, I had to convince them that a change needed to happen. It's hard to get them to convince to change something. This brings me to a story of, we bought a new cab tractor. Well, it was a used tractor, but it was new back around the year 2000. First cab tractor we ever owned. And I was tickled to death. I get to roll and make hay. I ain't got to eat that hay dust, I can be in air conditioned, stay clean. And started using it that spring. My dad, he would do all the raking, I'd do the rolling. I've been using it for about a week or two, and first day or two it was okay, and it kept getting hotter and hotter in that thing. And I turned it as cold as it would go, and I was just burning up. And I said, Dad, this air conditioner's something's wrong with it. Oh, it ain't nothing wrong with it. Just keep going, Well, one day it was probably a 90-some degree day, and all that glass, how hot them things will get. and we started rolling the field. I made a few rounds. Sweat started pouring. I took my hat off, made a few more rounds, pulled my t-shirt off, called my wife on the cell phone. I said, "Hey, can you bring us some water down here to the field? I gotta have something to drink. I'm thirsty. I'm dying here." So she come down, and when I come around the bend over the knoll, my dad was down there, you know, drinking some water, talking to her. I pulled up on the tractor and I got out and walked around. They both looked startled when they seen me because all I was wearing was my boots and my boxers. And I said, "It is hot in that tractor. It's like an oven." And Dad said, "Oh, it can't be that bad." And I said, "Take off in it." And he finally got in it, made one round around the field, got out and said, "Yeah, we need to get that air conditioning fixed. It's hot in that thing." So sometimes you just got to prove it to them some way that change needs to happen. So now I consider myself a grass producer. I use my cattle to harvest and market to forages. I try, of course it all depends on the weather, but try to graze year round if possible. I can try to control my cost by using less fertilizer and less equipment and less labor. Now all this requires a lot more management. You have to start thinking months ahead and planning things out. Like if you want to stockpile in the fall, a certain field, say, okay, well, where's the cattle going to be during that time? So I gotta, you know, you just gotta get at your calendar out and start doing some figuring and how you're going to rotate them around. And I try to control, you know, how long and where the cattle are. This is just an example I came up with of, if this is your cow cost, where's that pointer at? There it is. Cow cost a year. This is your calf weight. This would be your break-even price. So if you have the national average is around $600 to $700 for cow cost a year. And if you sold a 500-pound calf, it's $600 cost for your cow. You got to get $1.20 a pound to break even. Anything above would be profits. So I'm back here in this range, the $300 range. So I'm selling 600 and 700-pound calves, $40 to $50 a hundredweight. I'm breaking even. Anything above that, it's all profit. Now, 60 to 70% of your cow cost, and most people probably know this, but that's your stored feed, your hay. So that's what I wanted to eliminate. So I tried for a few years. This was years ago, but anyway, I found out about a cost share program. It wasn't 100%, you know, but it was a cost share program through the Soil and Water District and NRCS. I'd called them. They came out, looked at the farm, drew up a map, you know, kind of fencing out the creeks and putting in some water systems and a few cross fences, and I remember showing it to my dad and all, and you know, he didn't like it, didn't want to do it, whatever. So I dropped it, didn't say nothing about it. About 2 years goes by. We were out in the middle of the field, middle of a pasture, and it was always a pasture, but we were cutting hay that spring, and my cousin, he was a couple years older than me, he come pulling in there, and my dad, he was talking to my dad. He didn't finish raking. I was kind of finishing up rolling. And I finished up and walked over there, and he said, he's telling me about this cost share program they got going on at their farm, putting in these waters and fences and stuff. He said, man, that's what we need to look into. I said, I told you about that 2 years ago. He said a word to me about it. And so anyway, that's just another example, you know, they hear what they want to hear and things like that, but this is just one of the maps that they drew, and you know, the red that's like fencing out my stream down through there, which this was a real swampy area anyway, couldn't really use it. That's your pond, and there's a creek here, and then we put in cross fences, and that's waters in different places. And there's just, that's my dad's parcel on the other side of the highway. But we was farming everything together. I just still call it Dad's field, you know, because he originally owned it. Well, we put in about 16,500 feet of fence. We drilled 2 wells, put in 8 waterers, the 4-hole waterers for the cows, 2 stream crossings. All total, it fenced out about 7.5 acres that was fenced out of production, and that was replanted into trees, about 770 trees. And this is just an example of the trees that we planted around the pond. Now all that the cattle used to stay in all the time. That pond was muddy, murky. You know, the banks around the edges were bare dirt, eroding. Now you can see it's all done grown back with grass, covered up, healing up. Now this picture was taken several years ago. Them trees now are 10 feet tall or better, because this was like the first couple years that we put this in. And the cattle are now drinking cool, clean water out of the well. And there's just another example on the left. You can see before the trees are planted, it's just bare all the way around it. And then on the right, we planted trees. And I figured, well, yeah, that was taken this year. You can see how tall some of them are. I figured we got about a 75% survival rate on them, which is pretty good. And I've seen an increase in wildlife in the areas that we fenced out, and the animals learn that there's cover there. That's a shelter for them. So a lot more deer, turkey, a bunch of rabbits, a bunch of ducks. I have some cousins, children who come, and they started duck hunting it the last few years. And one morning, of course, woke me up at daylight. You know, I could hear guns firing, something like World War II going off, because the pond ain't but 50 yards from my house. But they ended up getting about 18 or 19 ducks that one morning. Just a chart showing the conventional versus rotational in 9 and 10. As you can see, we used to feed 300 to 400 rolls of hay. Our fertilizer was $18, $19, almost $20,000. And then as time went on, you see I went down to 2, 125. Now I went back up to 2. It was a little drier year. I'll probably be at 2 this winter. Now I just started feeding my heifers last Wednesday, a week ago. My cows was put in the last strip of grass on Sunday before I started on this conference. Now when I get home this evening or tomorrow, I'll have to start feeding them. And I'm surprised I made it that long, as dry as we were this year. But this is the number I like the best in 2015. 13 rolls of hay that whole winter, 3 days. And the only reason I gave it to them is because we had a heavy snow. And it got real cold and crusty, and I didn't think they could dig through it, so I gave them some hay. And I figured up my cow cost a day, and I may not have figured everything right, but it was about $1.50 feeding them hay. To graze, about 80 cents per cow a day. So grazing them costs half what it does feeding them. This is just tracking my forage heights, my field. You know, I track in the height of the grass when it's in, the dates, height of the grass when I take them out, and how many days, and then the number of head that was in there. And I've done this from 12 all the way to 16, and for some reason, I don't know why them are not written in, but I try to never graze it below, as you can see, 3 inches. 3 to 4 inches, that one was 2, but you can see what time of year it was. That was January, see. So in January, this time of year, there's no regrowth, so you can take it on down a little further. But during the growing season, 3 to 4 inches is the minimum I want to take it to, because you don't want to get it too close. You don't want to stress them plants. But in the wintertime, when it's dormant, I take it until it's all gone, and then move them on to the next. So, you know, you track your weaning weights on your cattle and things, and you need to be tracking your forage heights and stuff like that, so you can make adjustments, see what works, what don't work. Winter stockpiling, I try to do that by mid-August, late August, depending on the weather, if they're calling for rain. But I either have it bush hogged or grazed down by mid-August to apply nitrogen. Then I won't graze in fields until after the first killing frost, which is usually around where I'm at, around November the 1st, around Halloween, something like that. Like this past year, I ran out of grass where the cows were at on another farm that's right next to me in like the first part of October, but I didn't turn them in there. I started feeding them hay. I'd rather feed hay in October than I would in January. They'll eat a whole lot less hay. They don't need as much, ain't as cold, and it's a whole lot more pleasant to be out there doing it. It's 80 degrees, I can wear a t-shirt and it's freezing, 5 degrees outside. Now, when I started doing this, I asked my extension agent, and I said, should I be getting out of this grass? I want to make sure I'm recovering everything I need. He said, well, your highest requirement is for a first calf heifer that just calved, is, nursing a calf. Because she's raising that calf, and she's still growing too. So they need 11% protein and about 60% energy. So we tested hay in the barn, as you can see, in 13, and we done again in 15. In 13, it went well above what was in the barn. This is my stockpile grass. And then in 15, it was just under my second cutting of hay, orchard grass, but the energy's right there with it. So they're meeting all the requirements they need out for the stockpile. And that's just showing you there some of the winter stockpile. That's about 20 or so inches. And that's a tool that I would highly recommend, is that grazing stick. I used it a lot, especially starting off. Now I may eyeball some more because kind of learn it, but it's still on my RTV. It rides it all the time, and that's why half the numbers are worn off. I done pulled it in and out so much, it's just worn down. And there's some grasses showing you there. It looks like it's about 10 or 11 inches tall there, but it's bedded down, done laid over. So if you stand it up, you got about 2 feet. This is just an aerial photo of the dotted lines. Is just kind of where I put up temporary fences in the winter to strip graze. I'll start at a water on one end of the field and run a fence, and just keep working across the field. You don't have to back fence because there's no regrowth. And it all depends on the weather or what I have to do or whatever. I may give them enough for 3 or 4 days, or it may be enough for 5 or 6 or a week. Say I'm going to give them enough for 3 days, but in 3 days from now they're calling for 2 days worth of hard rain. Well, I don't want to be out there in the rain reeling up and moving a fence. So I was like, well, let me give them a little extra so I ain't got to go out there and do that. Or I may be like this week out of town, so you can allocate for that. It's always flexible. It changes year to year how I do it. This is just an example of it. I mean, I don't even look at this for the next year. I just go out there and just decide which way I'm going to do it. I may start in a different field every year. Depends on how I want to rotate them around. But to start, it's cheap to try. This is one of them extension cord reels you can get at Walmart for like $5 or $6. Got a bungee cord holding it to the fence, poly wire, and step-in post. This whole system, something like this, run you around 9 cents a foot. I can put one up and take another one down and have the cattle moved for however many days I've allocated in less than 30 minutes. So it's very quick, very easy. And now if I'm feeding hay, which I'm getting ready to start, that's at least 2 hours every day running a tractor. So this is a lot more faster and efficient. Now, since I've still got them reels, but I've bought some of the geared reels that's a little faster. If you're doing a lot, that gear will save you some time. It's just showing how much utilization they've done when they graze it, instead of turning them into the whole big field and they lay on a lot and trample a lot and things. If you give them just enough for a few days, they'll eat a good percentage of it. And then I'll take that fence down, as you can see there, and you can easily see where they was at. and then I'd move the fence on a little further, enough for 3 or 4 days, and just work my way down across the field. Now, after doing this several years, and this is in 2016, as you can see, I just moved that piece there. It's hard to see the cows, but there's some cows up on that ridge and a few on the side of the hill, but they've grazed that down closer than you can get it with a lawnmower or something. And you can see how lush and green this is. And this is in like November or something, I think it was, because yeah, as you can see the trees, leaves it's in the fall. But they'll take it right on down. And this is just, I think it was in January of a few years ago. Like I said, I give the cows enough for a few days at a time, because the more intensely you manage it, the more utilization you'll get and the less waste you'll have. It's just another up close picture. Now these are some heifers that were in the 3rd trimester. As you can see, their body condition is still looking great. They're gaining weight, still growing, and they're filled out fine. They're getting all they need out of this grass. Now, as the winter goes on, the colder it gets and the longer it gets, it starts to turn brown, as winterization of it. Looking across the field, it just looks like it's all dead and brown grass. But if you look down into it and peel it back, you start seeing some green forages in there. And they'll still eat it, and it's still nutritious. Now, this is one of the good benefits about strip grazing during the winter and only allowing them certain areas for a while and moving it, is they distributed that manure all over your fields, which is fertilizer, because 90% of what that cow eats coming out the rear. So I'd rather have it out there in the middle of my fields than around a hay ring in one big area or something like that. Because that right there, I haven't put any fertilizer for at least 5 years on my fields other than nitrogen in the fall. That's it. I soil test every other year, and they're coming out great. I take them to my salesman that I get fertilizer from, and he looks at them. He knows what I'm doing. He says, you don't need anything. He said, all you need is a little nitrogen in the fall just to give it that boost, to get that stockpile. That's all I've put on. That's why my fertilizers went from about $17,000, $20,000 to down to $3,000 or $4,000. Big savings there. Body condition of some of the cows that have fall-born calves on them. They're getting along fine. You know, the calves grow great. They'll actually graze, when I'm strip grazing, they'll get, if they're small enough until they get too big, low areas in the fence, you know, or high spot, little dips, calves will learn them things. They'll find it and they'll go under it. Sometimes there's 15 or 20 of them grazing in the field ahead of the cows. So they're getting the better grass, which is the key, because I want to wait on the calves. They got to grow. The cows I'm just maintaining. So they do very well on it. And you don't have to feed when it snows, unless it gets extremely deep or extremely cold. It was about 7 inches of snow right there, and I went out and I watched them for a while, checking the cows, thinking I was going to have to feed, and I watched them, and their nose went down. They just worked a little circle, just kept getting it bigger and bigger. And every time they'd look up at me, they just had grass hanging out their mouth, just chewing away. So they were fine. They didn't get any hay that day. And as you can see, just looking out on the hill right there, every one of them's down, heads are down grazing. And then once, of course, after it melted off some, you know, they're still grazing now. Now, having said that, I went out one day because it was really cold, and I said, this stuff is crusty and hard, and I said, they ain't going to be able to get through it. So I unrolled 2 or 3 rolls of hay, and some of them ate on it a little bit, but most of them laid on it because they just wanted a warm, dry place to lay down. They wasted more of it. They used it for bedding more than they did for feed because they didn't really need it. They dug through the snow. They'd leave the hay and go over here and graze. I was watching them do it. And One of the best places to have a calf is not around an old muddy hay ring or a hay feed or something, but it's out there on that nice clean pasture. It's healthier for them. They have more chance of survival and everything else. Now, just to show you your roots is what they say is a mirror image of what's on top. Now, the one on the left there was a stockpile. It was probably 18 inches of grass. I had just grazed it. The cows had just left the field. And I dug that up. I went on the other side of the fence 10 feet away in my yard that was mowed every week with the lawnmower. And there's a difference in it. As you can see, that plant had plenty of rest. It had them roots on them. And they're showing you just another example of them. And in the growing season, the summertime, the key is to not graze it too close. Like I said, 3-4 inches is about the closest you want to go. And you'd like to move them within a week, 7 days, maybe 10 at the max if you had to. Because after about a week, that plant starts making that new tiller, starts to regrow. And you don't want to take that second bite off that grass. You want to give it plenty of rest, at least 30 days or more. And a lot of mine will be 45, 60 days before the cattle get back around to it again. The cattle are much easier to handle now. Used to be me and my father and my grandfather when he was still in it. All right, we're going to work cows today. I knew that was a day job. It was like a rodeo, Going out there, you call them. Granddad would be blowing the horn on the truck, has feeds, and me and Dad be on four-wheelers or whatever trying to herd them, and you get all of them, and you got 2 cows left getting ready to get close to the gate. About 20 calves are following them, and one of them bolts to the left, and there goes all the calves, and that's what you're trying to get them calves so you can work them. But we'd finally get them, but it was midday time you got them all up, and then fighting them all day long, half of them half crazy and wild, but they're much easier to handle now. Now, as you can see, I'm standing here. There's nobody driving them or nothing. You just open the gates and they go. They learn the system. They're calmer. They see you coming. They come to you now. They follow instead of driving. It's a whole lot less stressful. You can work them in a couple of hours now. That, like I said, it used to take all day. Now, me and my wife and my 4 children will get them up. Me and my son will go out there and get them up. It takes 10, 15 minutes. They're all in the barn lot. We'll sort the cows from the calves. Another 30, 45 minutes for me and him. We start running them through the chute. We've done 60 calves in under 2 hours. Just, around Thanksgiving, I think it was. Back to the field and went. Done. 3-4 hour job all day. Total, and it was done. They get the field, their heads go right down to grazing, and they'll graze across that field till they hit a fence, wherever it may be, and just kind of work your perimeter, come back. And they'll let you know when it's ready to be moved. As you can see, they've grazed that field down, and they're all waiting at the gate because they learn where all the gates are. After they do it a few times, they know where to go, and they'll let you know. So I went over and I moved them. There's an electric fence down on the right side of that picture coming down the hill. So they're all in there just grazing that piece, and then they'll move to I'll just keep going across the field. I have very few weeds. This spot of weeds that you see right here is right where a gate is going to my water. It's a real high traffic area. So that, of course you're gonna have weeds where there's a lot of hoof action right there. But out in the fields, you may see a weed here and there. With good forage management, it helps keep the weeds down because the weeds don't get ahead of the grass. They let the grass stay ahead of the weeds. This is just a picture of one of the waters, and there's a gate in each corner. It's a 40-foot square corral around that water, so it feeds 4 fields. So I just open the gate for one field, I go to the next field, I open the other gate and shut that one. It's very simple to use. But I've also used it not just for that, because this is over in the middle of my farm, good ways from a barn. Sometimes you may just need to do a little work to something, not as far as vaccinating or anything, but I want to spray them for flies, so say for flies in the summer. So I just open the gate, they come in there to be moved, and I just spray them while they're in there and open the gate to the next field, and they proceed on through. Or I hang a back rub across the gate opening, and then just move it from gate to gate. So it's very easy to do. We also one time caught one of my neighbors. He had a calf got over there, and it was over for a few days, and couldn't get it to go back over the hill to his cows because he kept seeing mine. So finally one day I caught it in the water a lot, so I just shut the gate real quick, called him. He brought his trailer, took a portable panel, backed up to the gate, hemmed him in the corner, and right on his trailer. So it helped work out things like that. But I just try to use things, as much as possible, multifunctional, so to speak. Just an example, some of the one on the left, of course, we built mineral feeders. They're cheap, easy to build one. I have since purchased like the other one on the right there from the Ag brand. I like them a lot. I move them with the cattle. They just got an eye bolt, just drag them right with whatever field the cows are in. If it's really wet, I might go over and move them multiple times. Like if we're going to be in a field a week, I may move it twice during that week just so they don't kill the ground or kill the grass out in a bare spot. But the cattle don't seem to consume as much mineral as they used to. They're getting a lot more minerals from the soil because they're getting the deeper roots are bringing them up. Some of the benefits after doing this for several years of the strip grazing, the following spring, as you can see, this had no fertilizer on it since August prior of a little bit of nitrogen. And of course that's gone. So this is just all from manure and distribution of it. And all that clover that you see, I hadn't seen in that field for years, and I didn't put it in there. It just came up through the seed bank. So it's making the right types of forages and the grasses come up when it's got the right levels of nutrition in it. That's just another example there of another field, kind of the same way. Now this past year I tried some summer annuals. This was our old tobacco field, and I was wanting something to get through that, what they call the summer slump, kind of give my pastures a break for a while right in the middle of the hot part of the summer. So I went with a sorghum Sudan grass. I grazed it twice during the growing season, and then once more after it frosted and it killed it out. So I grazed it 3 times, and I got 10 days out of each time. It had 75 cows in there and about 15 spring-born calves. Now the key to that was you couldn't graze it too close. You had to leave like 10 inches. So you only take it down about 10 inches tall, and then you move them out. I did plant in September some rye and oats for a late fall and early spring grazing. They came up. I caught it right between some good rains a little bit. And they sprouted, then it didn't rain no more, so it never really grew. So I didn't get that fall grazing out of that like I was hoping I would. But I'm going to try it again this year because I got pretty good out of that, so hopefully it'll work a little better this coming up year. There it is. So mobile shade, like I said, we were very lack in some fields on trees. Had very few. Some fields had 1 or 2 trees, and that was it. And I mean, you get 80 cows and all the calves huddling around 1 or 2 trees. I was like, they're going to kill these things out. And they was fighting for shade. So I finally, what made my decision, I was looking at these for a couple years, and my neighbor cut down a bunch of trees on the fence property line. All the trees were his, but I was, of course, getting the benefit of the shade. That was gone. So I had to do something in. So I went on and bit the bullet, and I had to get 2 of them to get enough coverage for the number of cows I had. But that's a mobile shade unit. I can move them in 5 minutes, and I can pull them with the ATV, 4-wheeler, RTV, anything like that. And they don't weigh but like 3,000 pounds, so they're not real heavy, hard to move. And Now in the summer, instead of having a 20-acre field with one water, and you had to pretty much have it all because the tree, you have one shade tree. Now I can move my shade around, and I can more intensely manage it. I can do some more poly wires and cutting that field up better. So I'm excited to try that a little bit more. I've done it a little bit this summer, but as this year coming up, I'm going to do more and more. Now that is made from it's got like an 80% shade cloth on the top, and you can walk under it under a hot summer day, and it causes like an updraft, or the heat like draws the air through it, and it'll be 15, 20 degrees cooler right under there instantly. You can feel it. And the cattle, they love it because it took them a few days to get used to it, but now you go over and you have to move them out of the way so you can get to the hitch. And as I pull forward slowly, they're walking under it, trying to stay under that shade. They don't want to be in the sun. They're just staying with it. But this is our final product. What all of us trying to achieve is your calf. You're harvesting that forage and marking it through that calf right there, through the beef. This was the year I only fed them 13 rolls of hay. That steer on the left that you see there was just under 9 months old. It weighed 775 pounds. And all it had was his mama and grass. No supplementation. Maybe 3 days of hay. And that was probably late on that. But that's what you're trying to do. So I've talked a lot about how to cut costs and things, but now I'm trying to increase my cattle, the income side of it. Now, we've always used registered bulls, and I keep my best replacement heifers. But now I'm starting to sell in some of the local beef producer sales, some weaned and vaccinated, trying to get a premium for them cattle. And I done one last summer, and it did add some additional dollars to it. I seen the benefit. On my 6 and 7 weight calves, it added between $150 and $200 a head over what they would have sold 2 months prior right off in mama at the market. So that was additional profits. And one other philosophy that I do, because I've done some research, I read what I've read in magazines and things. Some of your biggest cattle farms in the country, and they had like the top common things that they do, making profitable. One of them was they don't give a cow a second chance. All of them had that in common. I started doing it, my dad and my granddad now, they would keep a cow years, she lost a cow. Yeah, but she makes a good one. We'll hold her over till the next year. Well, that cow's costing money every day. So now, no matter what the problem was, I don't give them a second chance. If they ain't producing, if they ain't working for me, raising the product, they're gone. They don't get no free ride. Some of the benefits of rotational grazing: feed less hay. That's one of the benefits, which is a nice big cost savings. I do less pasture dragging, if any at all now. I used to drag all of them with a big tire drag for like 2 or 3 days. Now the cows distribute that manure so well, I do a little bit. Maybe if I unroll some hay and you see a little left over, I might try to drag it around, but very little. Use less fertilizer. Less labor for feeding because it takes a lot less time. Cattle are much easier to handle. Like I said, the calves can graze ahead of the cows and get that best forage before the cows does. Your healthier soils, it's a whole lot less stressful, especially since I'm not making hay. Because you know how many sleepless nights most people have when you're making hay. Is it going to rain? Am I going to get it done? And all this. So I've eliminated that, which gives you a lot more free time for family, travels, hobbies, interests, whatever you may want to do. Now, I found this from the Noble Research Institute, 10 traits of a successful grazer. Be flexible and adaptive. Try to continually update your plans. Your stocking rates should be flexible. Nothing can be set in stone. Everything's got to be flexible. If it's a drought hits or whatever, you got to be flexible. Manage the farm as a business. You need to limit unnecessary and non-profitable inputs. Understand ecological principles. Observe the climate, animals, and your forages to make your management decisions. Have an inquisitive and passionate mind. Be an innovator. Ask questions. Look for better ways. You know, read stuff, research for it. Be a lifelong learner. Stay up to date on new techniques, new technology. There's always something that they're coming out with that's new, something to try. Be a big picture thinker. You know, focus on the big thing, the big picture, what you're trying to, your goal you're trying to accomplish. Don't get caught up on your little minor setbacks. You're always going to have little minor setbacks. Don't let that discourage you. Think of the big picture. Have a conservation ethic. You know, be a responsible caregiver of the land. Try to leave it better for the next generation. Clear and measurable and obtainable objectives. You know, try to keep good records. Monitor your rainfall, your amount of forage, body condition scores of your cattle, and your market prices. Be willing to share with others. You know, talk and learn from each other, and get satisfaction from helping someone else succeed. Be a cautious risk taker. Have an open mind. Take risks based on knowledge and experience. Now, what I think the key to success is management. You manage of your time, manage your forage, your cattle, you manage your cost, manage your records, and then you manage the marketing of your animal, which is from your forages. Now, quote by this next gentleman, he's, you know, some people may not like him, whatever, but I think he has a good quote by Henry Ford. He says, if you always do what you've always did, you're going to always get what you always got. So, if you want something different, something's got to change. You keep doing it the same, nothing's going to change. So try to work hard, smarter, not harder.